I'd heard rumors of an apparition roaming the wastes, terrorizing what few settlements remained. Now, I'd seen my share of horrors in my day, but nothing could have prepared me for what awaited me that night. I found her following the dusty path of an ancient riverbed. The light from her candles formed a ring around her through which no grit could pass. Every few minutes she'd pause and look to the sky, every flickering star, so alike the bundled soul she cradled in her many arms, and she'd weep. I was moved by her emotion and the care with which she handled the spirit she carried, so insignificant against her enormous frame, as if she understood how fragile and precious they were. Unable to bring myself to draw my arrow, I joined in her mournful song. It was nearly dawn, and she finally wandered out of sight. There was nowhere left to go. Every one of us was lost.
What up? It's your boy Tom, here back for my very first YouTube video. Thanks for freaking joining me, I guess. For those of you who don't know, I'm Tom, and I love to play freaking card games. And you know what? I decided, why not just make one? Let's go. I've wanted to get into content creation for a little while now. I'm an artist, and social media presence is a pretty big deal, so why not just make like a series of devlog type videos about this project I'm working on. My brothers and I and some friends, got programmers, artists, designers in the group. Yeah, I've just figured, like, let's freaking do it. You know, I'm kind of sick of waiting around. Anyway, this video right here, this is the first devlog. You didn't miss anything. This is the first one, even if the title might not be that, but you'll just have to, like, infer, I guess. What I'd like to do today is just, like, introduce who I am and my qualifications for, like, talking about this kind of thing. Do a wee bit of, like, introduction for the concept of this game, and then deep dive into the idea of top-down design, which is really what I've been doing to inform my decisions throughout this early, like, pre-production process. Thinking I'm going to do a series, that way anybody interested in the subject of game development and card games and art in general can follow along and hopefully find something they found valuable. I guess let's just get into it. Oh, and yeah, don't want to forget, the working title of this game is
For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life.
I've been a lifelong fan of card games. I've played Magic the Gathering on and off for nearly a decade. A couple times in the last few months, I've gotten into the Masters rank of Legends of Runeterra. Great game, doesn't get nearly enough attention anyway. And I did it with like a 91% win rate over like 20-something matches. Early on in Hearthstone, in the first few years, I played a lot. And actually, when I was in college, I was even on the varsity Hearthstone team. That's right. Your boy, all 5'7" of me, was a D1 varsity athlete. And I have the letter and jacket and jersey to prove it. So, what I'm trying to get at is, like, I'm probably better than you at card games. Okay? Just what it is. I haven't even mentioned yet the art. And that's kind of like my jam. Seeing piles of Magic the Gathering art on one of my friend's bedroom floor when I was like in middle school is what really started to pique my interest into focusing on like fantasy art. These days, I find myself making illustrations based off of or inspired by books that I read. But in college, I was doing concept art and animation for video games primarily. So, illustrations, concept art, animations, that's like a digital card game right there. Anyway, I think it's high time I put this degree to use. My major does not even exist anymore. It was dissolved. It's something else now. Anyway, this finally brings us back to the coil. This whole game idea started from such a simple question. How do different games handle resources or mana? It has rippling implications throughout the rest of the design of the game. And so it's fundamental and basic and it's incredibly important. Anyway, there's a lot to get into regarding mechanics and gameplay, but that's not for today. I know you want to hear it, but I'm not giving it to you. Not yet.
On my return journey from Kaida, I came across a small village just as the sun sank below the horizon. In the gloom appeared a dozen or so flickering lights, dashing towards me from the edge of the small basin that the settlement was built within. As the lights drew closer, I saw that they were candles cradled in the hands of young children. Each waif was bundled in a variety of worn, patterned cloth scraps, a dissonant clashing of colors, so unlike the fashion of the city. Children seemed alarmed, waving their free hands above their heads and whooping. At first I thought they meant to ward me off, but soon I realized they were beckoning me. One snatched at my sleeve and pulled me with surprising strength from the trail I followed, shouting about getting away from the water's edge, though the ground was parched and cracked. I walked with the children for a time, asking about what they were doing out so late and where their parents were. They told me they were the orphans of the village, tasked with making sure the grain fields wouldn't flood. They had nobody to watch over them. Then a voice from the far end of the group called out that there was one who guarded them. She used to be an orphan too, but she was gifted with a new body to match the resilience of her soul and fashioned a boat to carry other lost children across the river and into paradise. Many of the orphans seemed skeptical of the tale, but hung on to a tiny morsel of hope regardless. I journeyed with them to the edge of the basin and bid them farewell, just as the sun began to rise. Right then I thought to ask them where this river was that they spoke of, but when I turned back around, the trail was empty. Only the hint of smoke lingered in the early light.
So we talked a little bit about my hobbies, and if you can't tell already, I'm a nerd. I am. I'm a huge nerd. So in high school, instead of like doing cool things, I would sit around and find myself writing bits of history, lore, world building stuff for my own fantasy book, series, game. I don't know. I hadn't thought of that part yet. In college, I even wrote like a short story set in this fantasy realm as like a last ditch effort to finish a paper on time. It's something I've slowly and intermittently added to throughout the last like 7 or 8 years. I never really like went around talking to people about this except for on a few occasions. I just kind of wanted to let it sit in my head and steep like a tea bag in my brain juice. My skull was like a coffee mug, and the idea was the grounds, and my brain was the water. Anyway, I brewed it up pretty good now. In doing so, I unknowingly let the mood and atmosphere of the world develop and really deepen. Back to that question of resources and how different games manage that. I was thinking about it a few months ago, and I couldn't come up with a satisfying idea to the question of how I would manage a system like this without being able to incorporate thematic elements into that mechanic. Most card games, almost all of them, use some sort of resource system, and almost all of them are like exactly the same. You have one mana gem or crystal or whatever on turn 1, and then on turn 2 you have 2, and then it goes up to 10 usually. This has become part of just like the known or assumed language of card games. You know, if you play enough, you know exactly what that means and what to expect. I always find that to be a missed opportunity to really help the flavor or themes of a game come through and set the game apart in a way that's not superficial. I decided I need to use the world I built and the themes present to answer my own question. In doing so, coming up with this mana resource system idea, this theoretical mechanic, I fell in love with it and I didn't want to let it go. I wanted to play this card game. I couldn't let it remain just this hypothetical answer to a question that only I was asking myself. Now, check this out. I'm about to blow your mind. What I just explained was top down design. You take these themes and concepts and characters and build the mechanics to fit those. Um, Bottom up design would be like having mechanics you already want in the game and finding a way to make them fit. And that's not wrong. One is not necessarily better than the other, and they both certainly have their place. But when building these core mechanics, I find it easier to achieve a certain emotional response from the player with the top down perspective. So let's take a look.
There was a funeral going on the morning that I went into the wastes to look for that apparition. As I left the town on the outskirts of Kiira, I walked past a small procession. They were singing quietly over a plain wooden coffin. They were dressed in their brightest colors. They rang the bell on the post in the village square 5 times. A fattened dog, nearly hairless creature with gentle, watery eyes, stirred on top of the coffin, roused by the tolling. They settled the mud and spilled its lifeblood quickly so as not to cause any undue suffering. The family cheered, knowing the dog would serve as a companion and guide to their loved one with as much loyalty in death as it had in life. At the edge of the celebration, a young girl put on a brave face, fighting back her tears and smiling along with everyone else. The knuckles of her tiny, chubby hand were white as she gripped a doll to her chest. The thing was barely more than plaited grass and scraps of cloth. I found myself staring and wondering exactly when it is in life that we stop finding comfort in such simple things as a doll.
My Joe's gone. No more mud. So this video's been pretty goofy, lighthearted up to this point. The game, unfortunately, is not. The major themes revolve around death, the cyclical nature of life, death, rebirth, and how soul, the sort of essence of life, is a finite resource that can run out. In the game's setting, in that time and place, soul has basically run dry. Things are not dying when they should. The living things you play in this game, your units or creatures, are called vessels because they take and hold onto that mana or soul until they die, at which time it gets recycled back into the pool. When the vessel is in play, it is taking that mana and holding onto it, so you can't use it until it's gone. In my mind, that represents how soul is a limited resource. Another major theme is that there's no real end to the cycle. Through this unending march of time, there's a distillation of power. And as that cycle continues to turn, one vessel can accrue more soul and become more potent. And some are ancient. They persisted for so long and accrued so much soul that their physical bodies have started to become twisted and unable to handle the amount that is within them. When you run out of cards to draw from in other card games, you might lose, like in Magic, or in Hearthstone, you start taking increased amounts of damage every turn. Or in Slay the Spire, you're fine. You just shuffle up and draw from your discard pile as your new draw pile. And that last example from Slay the Spire is how it works in the coil, because there really is no end. So as you play the game, over here you've got your deck of cards that do things, and then here you've got your resource deck, and you draw from them separately. And you get to choose every time you draw. And as you go throughout the game, you're going to be taking cards from your deck, your hold is what I've been calling it, and turning them into the resources, the soul that you draw from your resource deck or your font. And so if you're playing smart, as you cycle through, you can distill that hold down to its just most powerful elements. And I think that kind of represents that accumulation of power I was talking about. While the world of the game is harsh and often tragic, to the humans who survive and struggle every day, it just simply is. It's not that there's no joy at all or no levity. There is. Even if that light is outweighed by the darkness, it's all they know. While you and I may think of their lives as some post apocalyptic nightmare, the vessels within it still cling to life with everything they have. The suffering they know is easier to bear than the unknowable terrors that may be waiting for them beyond the coil. Hey, what's up, everybody? Stopping by while in my editing uniform with my sick, very full beard and mustache to record the frickin' outro I forgot to record. So here it is, you know. Thanks for frickin' watching. Come here, Joy. Everybody say hello to Joy. She's my cat. This was a lot of work because I decided to record my own sound effects and like learn how to make them actually be spooky and layered and whatever. So anyway, leave a like, please. I'm begging. And like, subscribe and click the freaking notification thing because this took me so long to edit, you're gonna forget who I am by the next time I post. So anyway, yeah. Help me pay for health insurance, please. Bye. Oh my god, Joy. Holy shit.